That's as good as money, sir. Those are IOUs. Go ahead and add it up. Every cent's accounted for. Look. See this? That's a car. 275,000. Might want to hang on to that one.
We are live. Welcome to the show, everybody. All right. So those so-called experts are still backpedaling and trying to reframe the history of the COVID fiasco. None of us here are falling for it. Rand Paul insists that Trump's labor secretary pick should not be confirmed if she supports the PRO Act. And Vice President Vance insults multiple European countries by telling them that they should act like democracies if they claim to be democracies. And we're going to have an update on DOGE and more corrupt spending that they have uncovered. We are going to talk about all of this in episode 484 of the In the Tank podcast. All right. Well, I guess we didn't have a thing after the cold open. So here we are. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I'm Linnea Lueken. Today, as usual, we have Jim Likely, Vice President of the Heartland Institute. Jim, how are you?
I am doing just great. I'm doing better than Andy Singer, our producer extraordinaire, who hit the wrong video for the beginning of the thing. And there's supposed to be like a little inside baseball. It's supposed to be there's a video that plays right at the beginning, gives people a little bit more time to get into the beginning of the show. And then there's the cold open done beautifully by Linnea. And then the theme video is supposed to drop, which I put that wonderful little clip from Dumb and Dumber, one of my favorite movies, and talking about what DOGE is going to actually find when they go to Fort Knox to audit all the gold there. And so it was supposed to all be set up in this great comedic way. And Andy screwed it up. Now, Andy there was rumors, we had talked about this, Andy, that you might have actually been able to show your face and speak on the program. You are now back on probation. It'll be at least 3 months until you even sniff being on the air again. So well done, my friend. Well done.
Oh, it's all right. We can't be too hard on him.
No.
Okay. We also have Chris Talgo, editorial director at the Heartland Institute and also socialism research fellow. Chris, how are you?
Well, I'm doing good. Today was the official opening of spring training for baseball, so that's great. I think I can finally see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel here. You know, if you look in the background here, it might look nice and sunny here in Chicago, but it is freezing. This has been a terrible week, and I think we are almost finally at the end of it. So that's great news for me.
Nice. Yeah, I'm getting into pollen season pretty soon here myself, which is a very terrible time as well. All right, well, before we get started, as always, everybody, if you want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Since YouTube doesn't let us be monetized because we talk about things that they don't like, that's pretty much the only way that you can get us a little bit of help there. Please also click the thumbs up to like the video, and remember that sharing it helps to break through some of that suppression. Even just leaving a comment also helps. If you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Today, we're actually introducing a new segment. I'm not sure if we have graphics for it yet, but our producer, Andy, pitched to us last week this idea that I thought was a great idea. And that segment is called Unhinged, where we will treat you all to a selection of crazy stuff that people are saying online. And what better place to start than Reddit? So this week on the subreddit R Out of the Loop, user Corey SP asks, what is up with all of these government department heads stepping down after being approached by DOGE? Why aren't these department leaders standing their ground and refusing to let Musk tamper with things he's not even authorized to tamper with? Hell, they're not even just granting him access. They're just abandoning their posts altogether. Why? My fear is that he's been doing mafia stuff, threatening to have their families killed, blackmailing them with sensitive information, and more. Because this isn't normal. I hope that isn't what is happening, but it's really the only thing I can think of that makes sense. All right, guys. So the question I have is this a deranged adult, or is this a 15-year-old who needs a break from lefty social media.
Well, you know what? You know what stands out to me is how he makes this assertion based on zero evidence. Where is the evidence? I mean, if there was like, a video of Musk, like talking like a mobster, with the head of Social Security, I could see this, but there's nothing like that. So this is just more the same. It is, the hyperbole just never ends. And it's all based on nonsense. Obviously there is zero credibility to this report. And really what's going on here is these people are stepping down because they are being, put on the hot seat, and they're having to answer some really tough questions that they don't have the answers to. So good. Great.
Yep, exactly. Jim, did you have anything there? I mean, most of the good thing is, for once, most of the comments under here are kind of trying to moderate this person. There aren't too many people claiming that, yeah, it's definitely mob tactics going on. Elon Musk is going in there with a baseball bat covered in barbed wire, like
That's more the Walking Dead reference there. Yeah.
That they're going to lose their kneecaps if they don't obey. So I most of them are saying, well, they don't want to be involved in Musk's operation. The only way for them to not be involved is to leave. So anyway, so I thought you guys would enjoy seeing that as a little treat. We're going to try to make this segment a regular thing. So
I would just add to that. I mean, you could say he is using mafia tactics a little bit. He's not, of course, threatening to kill anyone's family like these deranged nut jobs on Reddit are claiming here. And in fact, this is a very tame, we want to ease you guys into this sort of stuff with Unhinged. This is there's a lot more stuff out there. I think maybe we didn't pick it because just putting it on screen would probably get this video taken down by YouTube, let alone
we can't show some of the stuff that they say on Reddit about Trump and Musk and stuff.
Right. But there's a phrase I've been trying to pull it together in my head and I can't quite get there, but something to the effect that if you've been privileged your whole life, fairness looks like oppression, right? And so if you're a government agency and you've been running amok your entire professional life, a smidgen of accountability brought to you seems like the mafia threatening your family and trying to knock your kneecaps out with a baseball bat. So all of these sorts of reactions, I think, is good. It's healthy. It means that for the first time in our lives, we are seeing in real time transparency and sunlight brought to our government. And finally, some accountability is being doled out. And, it's reminding me, you see all these reports of people resigning from their positions of power in government. And again, that's all to the good. It's like when they asked Donald Trump, well, you can't possibly deport all 20 million alleged illegal immigrants in the United States, can you? And he says, well, we'll try, of course. But what happens is that people self-deport. And we have seen at the southern border that the number of apprehensions of people trying to get into the country illegally has fallen by like 97% or something like that. And the reason that is because so many fewer people are even trying to get into this country illegally. Instead of, 5,000 apprehensions at the border in a month, which was common in the last year of the Biden administration, that's down to like 100 or 48. And that's because the policy is what straightens this stuff out. And in this case, when it comes to DOGE and exposing and rooting out corruption and and dirty dealing in our government, just exposing it to the light, putting it on the DOGE website, tweeting about it constantly, and exposing the public to what's really going on in our government, you're seeing people in our own government starting to, self-deport. I think there's going to be many thousands of federal employees who wish they took the good deal that they had in the first month of the Trump administration, where they could resign, get 8 months severance, and get on with their lives. There's going to be a lot of buyer's remorse, or I should say, I didn't buy it and I have remorse in our federal bureaucracy.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to get us on to our first main topic today, which is that the experts are still backpedaling still after all this time, still backpedaling on COVID. A recent tweet by attorney Laura Powell highlights a video recorded by Deborah Birx, who is Trump's White House coronavirus response coordinator, in which she states that the error, I guess, that the public health officials made was not explaining that the COVID vaccines were not like childhood vaccinations, and that they don't prevent anyone from getting the disease. Although I recall they did a whole lot more than just not explain it that way. They did a lot of affirmative, you will not get sick if you are given these vaccines type of claims. I don't want to spend too much time here. We're going to play the video, and then Jim, I know you're really worked up over this one, so I'll give the floor for your rant after we play the clip.
We've done wrong in public health is we didn't explain that COVID vaccines were nothing like the childhood vaccines, and that the childhood vaccines, like many of the diseases, you get it once, you don't get it again, and this is getting the children to have that disease without getting the deadly consequences. That is not what the COVID vaccine was designed to do. It wasn't designed to prevent against infection.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, what we didn't have time, I guess, to pull together. They're easy to find. You can just do it on X yourself. The videos of Fauci and Birx and Walensky, is that her name, from the CDC, and all of these government officials, plus Rachel Maddow and all these media people, all saying that if you get the shot, you won't get the disease. You won't be a carrier of the virus anymore, and that everybody has to get the shot in order to keep all of us safe. People forget that Joe Biden, and the Supreme Court stopped him, but Joe Biden was going to make it mandatory that every business that has 100 or more employees has to require all of their employees to get the shot. People, nurses, people on the front lines, the people that we used to bang, at least in Great Britain, I think it's 7:00 every night, they would bang pots and pans outside their windows to celebrate the frontline medical personnel that were keeping us safe and saving lives. Well, very quickly it turned into, well, if you're a nurse or a doctor and don't get the jab, you're fired. Thousands of our military veterans in the military, people who were there for 20 years or more, didn't want to get an experimental treatment against a disease that they would easily survive, and they were kicked out of the military. This is gaslighting extraordinaire. And for Birx to be the one saying this, Deborah Birx to be the one saying this, who wrote a book in which she admitted that she lied to Donald Trump in order to advance this what she now says was an unnecessary agenda of getting everybody shots. From what she just said right there, and we've had on a podcast in the past, we had Jay Bhattacharya talking about this. He was the person who birthed the Great Barrington Declaration, which said, and he spoke at our benefit dinner actually in September here in Chicago, and the Great Barrington Declaration said, in essence, only give this experimental treatment that we call a vaccine to the most vulnerable and let everybody else move on with their lives. Deborah Birx would now be a signatory to the Great Barrington Declaration. And let's also remember that the doctors and the people who supported that document had their careers ruined. And for Deborah Birx to come out now and say, oh yeah, that all of you people that said this about the COVID vaccines back when it mattered and took risks to do so, you were right all along. No, you don't get to freaking oh my God, I almost swore it. I almost used the bad word. You don't get to do that. You do not get to do that. For you to be on any media outlet and being allowed to say that instead of being, it should be like that scene in, well, not exactly like that scene in Game of Thrones. She should be walking through the public square, and there should be people ringing bells, yelling shame on Deborah Birx for this sort of stuff. You do not get to now say you were right all along. And this does trigger me, Linnea, because every time we talk about COVID, I start to get a little bit worked up. And we do this every few months or so, but this is insane. And let's also remember why, and I'll give it over to Chris. I'm going to calm down. Let's also remember why there was all of this COVID panic and lockdowns and all of this sort of stuff. It was to get Donald Trump out of office. If you don't have a complete entire societal panic over a pandemic. You don't get to have universal mail-in voting. You don't get to have tell people that they can't possibly go to vote in person. It's too dangerous. You get to shut down people's businesses and entire lives, and then point the finger at Donald Trump for being to blame. And so all of this was nefarious. And so, no, Deborah Birx, you do not get to come out now and say the obvious truth with a freaking smile on your face and not have somebody push back. There you go.
Yep. Yeah, there it is.
Shame.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible. And now, of course, the narrative has changed to, well, we never said that, you had to get the vaccine, you only would lose your job if you didn't. It was a terrible situation. I mean, it's part of the reason why I don't work at the last job that I used to work anymore, is because I was told basically that I would not be, it's not that they were going to fire me if I didn't get the vaccine, but they weren't going to send me out on jobs anymore, which is where you get paid. So I would just be in limbo, basically. So that was pretty much terrible. It's part of the reason why I quit. So Chris, do you have anything that you wanted to add to this topic? Because I wanted to spend a short period of time on it, because we've got some bigger ones coming up. But
No, it's fine. Just a couple of things. I mean, Jim covered a lot of ground there. I just want to go back and just make sure everyone is well aware that in 2020, during the early days of COVID-19, Fauci, Birx, and a bunch of other people were just raising the alarm bell, saying this is, the worst thing ever. We got to shut down all the schools. We got to shut down all the businesses. Even while that was happening, there were still so many instances of Lori Lightfoot, Nancy Pelosi, Gavin Newsom, flagrantly, flaunting those rules. So they knew in real time that this was not nearly as, devastating as they tried to make it out to be. There's that. Then there was when the vaccines, or so-called vaccines, came out, and the CDC shortly after changed the definition of a vaccine on its website. I wrote multiple op-eds about this because this just shocked me to death. How they just, nonchalantly changed the definition of a vaccine to imparting immunity, meaning once you take the vaccine, you are in the clear for, forever, to, helps antibodies or some, weird language like that. So there's that, they knew that they were, lying through their teeth the entire time. It was also an emergency use authorization, which means that those drug companies are, never going to be held liable for all the health consequences, that we now know has happened as a, result of the COVID so-called vaccines. But just there is one other thing that I really want to stress here. 2025, we're 5 years out from the COVID-19 pandemic. An entire generation of children are still struggling because of it. Reading scores, math scores, science scores, ELA scores are all down. I don't know, as a former teacher, if you're ever going to be able to make that up, because we just erased 2 years of education from these kids when they needed it most. There's also all the psychological and mental, health toll that is taken on those kids. What about all the people that also lost their businesses, that were never able to restart their businesses, relaunch them? These are the long-term consequences that, stupid policymakers like Anthony Fauci do not even try to do a cost benefit analysis and just say, well, you know what? We want everyone to stay at home for more than a year, and we don't care about the collateral damage that's going to, cause. And that just drove me insane while it was happening. And I kept saying, guys, wait till a couple of years later, when we're seeing all the consequences of this, the unintended consequences, people not wanting to go to work anymore, just all this kind of stuff. Guess what? That all could have been prevented, and it could have been prevented had people like Deborah Birx, Fauci, and others just been honest in the first place. But like Jim said, of course, they had a political agenda. The mainstream media was, playing right along as always, hyping this thing up to death. And you know what? It's really sad, because in 10 years, I think we're going to look back at this and say, we overreacted. This was a huge mistake. And for the children that were, in school, or not in school, I should say, during 2020, 2021, you're never going to make that up. You're never. They are going to be permanently scarred from this. So thank you so much for, Deborah Birx, for, admitting a couple of years after the fact that, it actually, you were full of, what, the whole time. So,
yeah, and I know we want to move on, Linnea, but I just one last thing. I mean, the thing that gets me really triggered on this is that there's been no accountability for those who lied and wrongly, locked down the whole world. They weren't just mistaken about this stuff in a novel coronavirus and a global crisis that no one had ever seen before. They willingly and consciously lied and took and instituted policies that were completely not necessary and destroyed people's lives, people's psyches. And there's been zero accountability to anybody who did this stuff to us. And until there is, I don't want to see Deborah Birx on TV. I don't want to see her given a book contract. I don't want to see Anthony Fauci anywhere until they are held accountable for these lies. And so, but nobody seems to want to hold them accountable. They just get to go on with their lives as if nothing happened, and they get to pretend that they had our best interests in mind when they obviously did not. That is proven to be false.
Sorry, Linnea, just one more thing. And, because Jim, because Jim brings up so many good points here. Anthony Fauci made millions of dollars through his book deal, through his Net Geo documentary and all these things. Anthony Fauci is a criminal. Anthony Fauci, is responsible for this because he gave money to Eco Health Alliance for gain of function research in Wuhan. Like, we all know that, but he got a pardon, so he's off the hook. So great.
Yep. No, it's very, very, very infuriating. I mean, so many lives were ruined. Yeah. I mean, how much more can we say about it? So I'm in a radical shift of pace, and and Chris, I'm going to go to you on a lot of this because I think you've written about this in some cases, and I know Heartland's been banging the drum on this issue for a long time. So Rand Paul says that he is not going to support Lori Chavez de Raymer unless she says that she no longer supports the Protecting the Right to Organize Act of 2021. Breitbart reports that Senator Paul said it would override all the right to work state laws and result in a transformation that would be such an assault on freedom of choice for employees you can't imagine. Paul explained that 28 states have right to work laws, and when one compares the economics, unemployment, economic growth, and other factors, the right to work states are killing it. Most of these are throughout the South. Kentucky became one about 5 years ago, but there's at least 28 states, maybe a few more, that are right to work. And basically, just as you don't have compulsory union dues, you can still have unions. You can still do collective bargaining. You just can't force people out of the workplace if they don't want to pay dues for political reasons. This is pretty dramatic, and I have not opposed any of Trump's nominees, but, I lead the effort for a national law, and I've been a big supporter of the state laws, been close to the right to work movement for a decade or more, and so I can't in good conscience support her since she supported the PRO Act, he said, noting that he plans to ask her at Thursday's hearing if she's willing to renounce her support of it. So, as I said, the Heartland Institute has been a strong proponent of right to work. And Chris, you were a teacher in my neck of the woods for a long time, so you have a lot of experience with unions, especially teachers' unions. So is Rand being dramatic?
No. So, this is one of the few picks for Trump's cabinet that I disagree with him on because of this issue alone. So when I was teaching in Illinois, I was actually a substitute teacher. I was not full-time yet. I had my teacher's license and all that kind of stuff, but I had to pay union dues even as a substitute, and I made almost nothing. I mean, it was like $20, I think, like per class, like per period or something ridiculous like that. Yet I was forced to pay union dues, not only from all my earnings, but also just, from my biweekly paycheck. I had to just give them money, even though they didn't represent me. They did nothing for me. So that's part of the reason why I did move to South Carolina. South Carolina's a right to work state. Immediately, we were told you don't have to join this teacher union. Almost none of us did at the school. I think maybe only a couple handful did. And you know what? It was much better. It's much better because you have more freedom. You don't have to go through all the union paperwork and just like all the bureaucracy involved with it. The unions don't really even do that much for teachers nowadays. It's much more about the union protecting themselves and making sure that membership is as big as possible so that they get more union dues. That's really what it's about. I think the right to work states obviously are on the right side of this issue. I would not be in favor of a law that basically bans right to work states. And last time I checked, here in Illinois, the Janus decision basically made this a moot point that no, you cannot be forced to join a union. You can't be compelled to. But apparently, for some weird reason, this nominee thinks that that would be a good thing. I am completely opposed to it.
Right. It's interesting. Rand actually has commented on pretty much everything that we're going to talk about today, so he might keep coming up as we're talking about it. But he's always been, again, one of those kind of firebrand characters in the Senate who is very strong on these issues. And as I said before, the Heartland Institute, we have all sorts of white papers and all sorts of research on right to work and the way that it helps the economy of any state that it's been passed in. There are some states that withdrew it and immediately began to see detriments from withdrawing from right to work.
Linnea, can I just add one more quick thing? Jim, don't want to step on your time here, but just real quick. So, as someone who taught American history and who knows a lot about American history, unions were needed in the late 1800s when companies could take advantage of workers. I think that is just that is historically accurate here.
Right.
But now in 2020, the tables have turned so much in the other direction that I think people don't want unions. So we actually want the freedom to choose. And if you want to be in a union, that's fine. No one's saying you can't, but it's that force. It's the use of coercion saying, no, you have to, even if it's against your will. That's what really is starting to, make people question this thing. Like if it's so good, it should just be something that you want to do. It shouldn't be forced upon you. It's funny how they're trying to force people in unions, just like they tried to force people to take the vaccines or so-called vaccines, which makes me think like, why? Why do they have to, succumb to that?
Yeah, I mean, Trump's had, union support, depending on the union, obviously, probably not the teachers' unions, but I think the Teamsters and a couple other organizations have come out in support of Trump. Jim, do you worry that will influence the Trump administration to pick up stuff like the PRO Act again? I think it went to the Senate and then just like sat there forever. It really hasn't moved since then.
I would think not. I don't think Donald Trump needs to support the PRO Act in order to retain his appeal to blue collar workers in places like, West Virginia and Michigan and Indiana and places like that. But look, right to work laws were not created in a vacuum. Right to work laws passed in many states because there were laws before that compelled people to join unions as a condition of employment in all sorts of different industries or companies, what have you. And so, that's why they existed, because, nobody should be compelled to join a union and frankly, have their wages docked to that union without their consent. That shouldn't be a condition of employment. And that's why right to work laws, proliferated state for state. And I am, of course, we're a libertarian conservative think tank. And as a conservative and libertarian myself, I am not big on compelling anyone to do anything. All relationships should be voluntary on both sides of the transaction. Compelling someone to take action is not a good moral stand, in my opinion. I will make one exception when it comes to unionizing. And that is, I think I would be okay with the law saying that public employees are forbidden from forming unions. And that is because in those sorts of circumstances, it is a negotiation among a public service or a public employee union and its employer are basically people sitting on the same side of the table and just negotiating how much of our tax money they're going to take in order to make sure everybody is happy. That is not ethical. That is not right. And we, the people who are paying the salaries and the benefits for these public employees, do not get a seat at that table. So unless somehow that can happen, I don't think it's a good idea to have public employee unions. And in fact, a hero of the Democratic Party and the left, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, warned that it would be a disaster if public employees were allowed to unionize. And that's what we have today. One of the largest, most powerful political forces in our country these days is the public sector, the public employee unions, be they teachers or others that are paid by taxpayers. That union membership in the private sector has been going down over the last several decades, and that's because it's not needed, that there is sufficient power on the side of the employer and the employees to negotiate and make sure that everybody is happy. So again, as Chris said, there was a reason, unionization of say coal miners and steel workers made a lot of sense in the late 19th and early, maybe through the mid 20th century, but it has long outlived its usefulness. And the idea that you need a federal law to allow people to organize is there's actually no justification for that at all in our economy.
Linnea, one other thing. I think you mentioned that, Trump got a big portion of the union vote, which is true, but I don't think they voted for Trump based on him possibly, endorsing the PRO Act. I think they voted for him because of his common sense policies about regulations, letting us actually build things here, bringing manufacturing back. That's why they voted for Trump. It's not. I think it had very little to do with the union aspect of things. More about, hey, this guy actually is on our side. He doesn't want to inhibit our professions like the Biden administration, did time and time again. He actually, is America first. He cares about the American worker, and I think that is why he got so much support from blue collar union workers.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Abel Windsor in our comment section made a good point where she said about half of union members in the United States today are government workers. I agree with Jim on that point. That's ridiculous. You should not be able to unionize as a government employee. It's definitely a conflict of interest there.
Well, especially when they funnel a lot of that funding to Democrat, campaigns too. Yeah. So it is so corrupt. Illinois that's been happening for decades, where the Illinois teachers unions, shovel money to Democrats in the state house, and then they get all these, these generous pay packages. They get all of this stuff. So, it's a conflict of interest.
Oh, I think we could probably spend an entire episode, and maybe we will spend an entire episode someday just talking about the Illinois teachers unions, because they basically run the state, right? It's the biggest racket besides maybe the alcohol distributors racket.
Well, just I'm sorry, I know I kind of keep going back here, but going back to the pandemic, remember that Randy Weingarten and some of the teachers unions were the ones who were coordinating the guidance with the CDC. Like, how corrupt is that too? These have people have no medical, no healthcare, expertise. Yet they were saying, well, we can't go back to work. We can't do this. And I remember how ridiculous it got. Even, this was obviously during George Floyd riots and all that stuff. They were saying, we want, free housing. We want, all this. And it was like, what are you doing here? This has nothing to do with education. It has nothing to do with students. That is one thing that I learned from my time in the, state of Illinois, working in the Illinois Teachers Union. It's not about the students at all. It's all about trying to get as much money to the union coffers as possible so that they can spend it on political, like lobbying and stuff.
Right. It definitely, I remember when I was in high school, I went to high school in Illinois. And I remember my American history teacher, like the first day of class, he pointed at the stack of textbooks on the countertop. And he told us, we're not going to use those textbooks. The union requires that we use this textbook. I'm not using it. We're going to use it for definitions or something, and then we're never going to look at it again. So don't bother taking those pieces of garbage out of here. That was like the best opening day of any of my classes ever. The guy was so mad about having to be in the union. All right, you guys, speaking of corruption and people getting called out for their corruption, this is a topic that I have been very excited to cover because I just think it's terrific. Vance really took European leaders to task last week, especially German leaders in Munich last week in the speech given at the Munich Security Conference. We have a clip for you guys, but before we get to that, I want to read a little bit from this BBC article to kind of tee it up, because all the elites in Europe are extremely offended by Vance's chutzpah here. Their tone is, how dare he call us out? So from the BBC, we have, It had been expected that Vance would use his speech at the Munich Security Conference to address possible talks to end the war in Ukraine. Instead, he spent the majority accusing European governments, including the UK's, of retreating from their values and ignoring voter concerns on migration and free speech. The address was met by silence in the hall and later denounced by several politicians at the conference. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said it was not acceptable. How dare he? My goodness, I hope they had some smelling salts at that conference because, boy, it sounds like they had a really bad time. So what exactly did Vance say in his own words to get them into such a tizzy? We have a couple of video clips here if you guys want to cue those up for us.
And I believe deeply that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, the opinions, and the conscience that guide your very own people. Europe faces many challenges, but the crisis this continent faces right now, the crisis I believe we all face together, is one of our own making. If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you. Nor, for that matter, is there anything that you can do for the American people who elected me and elected President Trump. You need democratic mandates to accomplish anything of value in the coming years. Have we learned nothing that thin mandates produce unstable results? But there is so much of value that can be accomplished with the kind of democratic mandate that I think will come from being more responsive to the voices of your citizens. If you're going to enjoy competitive economies, if you're going to enjoy affordable energy and secure supply chains, then you need mandates to govern, because you have to make difficult choices to enjoy all of these things. And of course, we know that very well in America. You cannot win a democratic mandate by censoring your opponents or putting them in jail, whether that's the leader of the opposition, a humble Christian praying in her own home, or a journalist trying to report the news. Nor can you win one by disregarding your basic electorate on questions like who gets to be a part of our shared society.
Yeah, we have two other clips here. One on Vance. I labeled it Vance Religion and Vance New Sheriff in Town. We can play those. Just let me. I heard this speech, or I watched it afterwards. I saw X was just going abuzz. Commenting on this. It was amazing. And then if you actually listen to the speech, and it's quite short, it's about 15 minutes long in total. And I listened to it and watched it. And like you said, Linnea, it's like, he got almost no applause. There were several applause lines in there for people who value freedom. And there was very little applause. Even had a couple jokes in there that nobody laughed at. It was like, I started to feel bad for him. It's like, they need to make this like the Golden Globes, and they all have to be sitting at tables, and you just, get everybody, some drinks or something, loosen them up so that so that maybe his speech would get a little bit more of a welcome reception. But in my opinion, that 15 minutes by J.D. Vance was the best speech an American president or vice president has given to Europe since Ronald Reagan at the Brandenburg Gate, when he said, tear down this wall. It was a challenge to the basically Western Europe to look, we have spent trillions of dollars, sacrificed millions of lives to secure your freedom there in Europe and to protect it all through the Cold War. And now we look over there and you're putting people in jail for praying within too close to an abortion clinic. You're putting people in jail in Germany for insulting someone online or sharing a meme that you deem racist. Why should America? And this was the message. That's why they weren't clapping, and they had very glum looks on their faces in his speech, is because the larger question he was asking or challenging them with was, why should America continue to support your societies? You spend almost nothing on your own defense. Why should we continue basically subsidizing societies that have no value whatsoever on any free speech values? That you don't even respect their own elections. He mentioned in his speech on how Romania had an election and the elites didn't like it, so they just canceled the results of the election. Why should America continue to support a Western Europe that has no adherence to basic fundamental human rights like free speech, freedom of assembly, and respect for the selections of voters when they go to the voting booth.
Oh yeah, it was very telling when they give those shots of the audience there, and all these guys are like, I don't know, like shrinking in their seats before Vance. They all look very dour. They're not having a good time. And like I said at the beginning of the show, Vance is basically telling them, you don't get to criticize us, and you don't get to call yourselves, these great bastions of democracy when you're not acting particularly like a democracy. He gives a couple of examples. I don't know if the clips that we have bring those examples up specifically, where he is discussing free speech. There's something weird going on with my camera here. Not sure what that's about. Where there are a bunch of free speech violations that have gone on in the United Kingdom and in Germany. And to be clear, they don't have free speech enshrined in their constitutions the way that we have in ours. And I'm not saying that, every country has to have a constitution just like ours. Every country has to, follow the same exact regulations, the same exact everything. But if you're going to be telling people that you're a freedom-loving country, that you are, especially when it comes to the UK, which is the country that we got our conception of free speech from in the first place, and you are to start clamping down on people who, just oppose mass migration publicly, or who are just praying outside of an abortion clinic and not even, harassing anybody. It's disgusting. You don't get to do that and then have America kiss up to you like you're a bunch of, I don't know, are betters in some way, because you obviously aren't.
Yeah, I mean, we can play, Andy, maybe play the Vance religion labeled video here, and then I think I would set up Chris nicely.
And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Very well said. He's just killing it. This I want to bring up this article from the Post Millennial. After Vance gave this speech, Cheryl Atkinson on 60 Minutes hosted a couple of German diplomats to talk about their, criminal penalties for social media posts. The Post Millennial reports that German officials laughed as they talked about confiscating people's phones and laptops over social media posts, joked about excessive fines, and said free speech needs boundaries, and advocated for criminal charges against the citizen who calls a politician a dick in a social media post. It's, now you can't even tell your representatives what you think about them in Germany. Germans are stereotypically not known for being particularly warm. So I feel like they're going to catch a lot of people with this trap here. What do you think, Chris? You're smiling.
Yeah, well, my mom's from Germany, so I get
Yeah.
I get all the
I have
the
a lot of
jokes. Blah,
German
blah, of
family.
course, of
Yeah.
course, of course. Yeah, I mean, we are who we are. Okay, just a couple of things I want to talk about here. So let's contrast JD Vance's speech at the Munich Security Summit with Vice President Kamala Harris's speech there right before Vladimir Putin decided to invade Ukraine. So I think there's just such a stark contrast between the tone of the old administration and the tone of the new administration. Obviously, I favor the tone of the new administration way more. And then on the whole, like Europe thing. So I've read a lot of Mark Stein's books, and Mark Stein was talking about the collapse of Europe, the suicide of Europe decades ago. And he was spot on. And I remember everyone saying, oh, he's just, he's just, being so hyperbolic. No, he was totally right. And you know what this really goes back to? This goes back to when Europe just started doing the open borders thing and just letting all these people flood into their country. And then they started to say, well, you know what? We've done all these bad things in the past, colonialism of 200, 300, 400, 500 years ago. So now we're going to right those wrongs. And you know what? That just never works. And what's happened now is almost, it's so strange. It's like Germany's backsliding back into the days of the Kaiser, where you've got these elites who just run the country and you cannot question them. Like what is going on here? So there's that happening. But at the same time, across Europe, we're seeing, these rise of populist leaders. So that gives me a lot of, confidence in the future. And Germany's going to be having an election pretty soon. And guess what they did to their prime minister? They ousted him. He's, a liberal prime minister. They said, no more of this stuff. We don't like this government. And all over the news, they always talk about AfD. It's called Alternative for Deutschland. And oh, they're Nazis. They're neo-Nazis. No, they're not. Not even close to neo-Nazis. What they are is the Trump version of Make Germany, great again, or Germany first. What they're saying is, we should put our citizens first, which makes total sense. We should have common sense policies in terms of energy. We shouldn't be relying on Russia to buy natural gas. We want to actually buy it from America, and we should sell it to them. So these are just common sense things that I think are finally coming to the forefront here. And this conversation is long overdue. And if Europe wants to maintain its stance in the world as a powerful player, it's going to have to get on board with this. So I think what we saw with Brexit, just before Trump was elected, and then we've seen, these leaders rise to prominence in Europe who are kind of spouting the same sort of, policies. I think that is the future of Europe. And I think that the far left, in Germany and France and all these other countries are just scared out of their minds because, they've realized that the people finally have had enough of the stupid climate policies, the stupid agricultural policies, and, just the lack of freedom. So I think that this is going to be the beginning of the end for Europe's, descent back into the dark ages. And I really hope that Germany and France and Italy and all these countries realize that it doesn't have to be this way. They can and should provide for their citizens first and foremost, and they can and should do what's best for their country. So that's my hope here.
Yeah, Vance's favorite, Margaret Brennan, on Face the Nation, recently made the very bizarre claim that the Holocaust occurred because the Nazis weaponized free speech. Which is a bizarre twist.
It's not bizarre. That's being way too generous to her. That is just flat out like so wrong. It's not even close. There was no freedom of speech in Nazi Germany. Go read Socialism at a Glance. We did a chapter on Nazi Germany. There was literally zero freedom of speech there.
And it's not just that the Nazis came in and clamped down on all this free speech that the Weimar Republic previously had. The Weimars were also viciously clamping down. It turns out, I'm not defending Nazism or anything, obviously, here, but they clamped down hard on Nazi party content before the Nazis came to power. And obviously, clamping down on that free speech did not work out for them one bit. Not one bit at all. It ended up being an awful, awful situation. And that's such a understatement that it's almost ridiculous to even say. So, Germany just can't learn. They just...
Well, and wasn't that what World War II was all about? And Jim, tell me if I'm wrong here, but wasn't it Churchill who said, and I think it was Churchill, I might disagree strongly with what you say, but I will defend your right to say it. I mean, wasn't that what the entire war was about?
Yeah, and that actually, J.D. Vance said that. He quoted that quote in his speech this week, or was it this week? Yeah, this week or last week to Europe. Look, as I mentioned before, and we can move on to our last topic here, but as I mentioned before, the United States has sacrificed quite a bit in blood and treasure to make Europe and the world, quote unquote, safe for democracy. And all of these bureaucrats in Europe go on and on. They use the word democracy, democracy this, democracy that. We have to restrict speech to protect our democracy. And apparently they also have to cancel or nullify elections to, quote unquote, protect democracy. And I was trying to imagine what this speech would have been like if, say, Kamala Harris went there, or I guess who was her running mate? I don't even remember. I'm being honest. I don't remember. Yes, right. Tim Walz go there and gives a speech like this, or frankly, even Barack Obama going there and giving this address. J.D. Vance, this was, again, as I said, I think this is the best speech a high-level United States government official has given to Europe since I think it was 1987, Reagan's tear down this wall speech in Germany. But J.D. Vance pointed out, kind of like the emperor has no clothes. You can't be saying that you want to protect your democracy when you are shutting down the voices of the people and not accepting their expression of democracy. If it means anything at all, you have to respect the voice and the vote of the people. And Europe is not doing either of those things in any real way. We're going to see, I think Germany's election is this week. Yeah. We will see if AfD, has a sweeping victory, which is probably to be expected, especially if they heard J.D. Vance's speech and saw the reaction of their own country to this call for freedom and democracy to rule in Europe and not the elites. And that's what's happened here in this country, is that the American people, and that's why J.D. Vance is the perfect vessel for this kind of message. The American people also want their government and their country back from the elites who think they are not accountable at all to the voice of the people. Free speech crackdowns have happened in this country, and they're going to be less so now that we have a different president in the White House now. But we will see. And the smugness on the faces and the absolute inability to listen to what is being said by J.D. Vance and to take it to heart, that you can't protect democracy when you disrespect and even put in jail the people who oppose your rule. That's what democracy is. It's the people choosing the direction of their country and the leaders to implement that direction. And if you're not going to uphold that, why the hell is America continually defending you when you don't defend even the most basic human values in a Western, democratic, free society?
I watched that segment where they talked about the German police going in and raiding the guy's apartment who posted a meme or something on social media. The German police went in there with a SWAT team, and it was just so insane how much force they were using, how many resources they're using for a guy who posted a meme on social media, and it's just wow, that is really scary stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and it's obviously, they didn't do that for him. They did that for everybody else in Germany watching, right? So that they know, this is coming for you. This is how serious we are about you posting a stupid meme on social media or saying something mean about a politician on social media. Those coward politicians. Christine Laurel in our comment section here makes a good point. She says restricting free speech is a means of thwarting people's attempt to organize against tyranny. And I think that's exactly right. And I think that's actively what the UK is doing and what Germany is doing. They are restricting people's ability to complain about the state of their country. And it's very, very bad, especially when you are a country that is ostensibly some kind of a democracy or like what would it be like?
Well, but just real quick, it's so much more difficult for them to do it in today's day and age because there's so much more open communication. So back in the 1930s, if Stalin wanted to say, "Hey, I wanted all these people to shut up," it was a lot easier. Okay, but now with the internet, with social media, someone can go in their basement and spread a message to billions of people by just clicking one button. So it's going to be, I think, a lot more difficult to them, and they're going to have to get a lot more heavy-handed, even than Stalin did, where they would go in and if you had a newspaper that they didn't approve of, they burn down your little newspaper press. But nowadays, what are they going to do? Go in and take everyone's cell phones? So I don't think this is going to play out well for them. I don't think they even really have thought that far ahead, because trying to stifle free speech in 2025 is nearly impossible.
Yeah, I mean, and those Germans were bragging about taking people's phones away and taking people's internet access away and stuff.
But then they act as if that person cannot go and get another phone or cannot get access to internet. I mean, what are they going to put him in, like some sort of cell with like no access to like any communication methods whatsoever?
Do they need a Faraday cage?
House
Is that how those work?
Yeah.
Put him in the basement of Neuschwanstein Castle and just throw away the key. I mean, is that what it's going to come to?
That's what you get for posting a meme. All right. So Germany and the UK and many other countries in Europe are very much lost. Their countrymen do not feel that they are being represented by their government. And the same kind of thing, not quite to the same extent when it comes to the free speech issue, but the same kind of thing has been going on in the United States for a long time. Our government has spent our money in ways that most people are not even aware of. And lately, DOGE has been kind of doing a little auditing, and they have found things that are, let's say, not ideal. DOGE is working currently at breakneck speed to unveil a lot of the mischief our government has been getting up to. We discussed this particular issue last week in Climate Realism, but I want to highlight this one again from the Washington Free Beacon. DOGE finds $2 billion in taxpayer funds earmarked for a Stacey Abrams-linked group. DOGE discovered $2 billion in taxpayer funds set aside for a fledgling nonprofit linked to perennial Georgia Democratic candidate Stacey Abrams. The Environmental Protection Agency under the Biden administration awarded Power Forward Communities the grant in April 2024 as part of the agency's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund program. Power Forward Communities received the Green Energy Grant despite the fact that it was founded months earlier in late 2023 and never managed anywhere near the grant's dollar figure. It reported just $100 in total revenue during its first 3 months in operation, according to latest tax filings. Power Forward Communities was established in October 2023 as a coalition of groups led by Rewiring America, a left-wing group that advocates for electrification policies and a transition away from fossil fuel dependence. Abrams, who serves as a Rewiring America's senior counsel, said at the time that she was thrilled to be part of the Power Forward Communities coalition. So this group pretty obviously was just created specifically to get in on that funding that was being passed out. Billions of dollars awarded to a fresh new NGO is fascinating behavior. Jim, I think you had comments on this last week. If you want to go over those again.
Yeah, I mean, this is I've made this analogy on a couple other shows, but we've never been able to invent a perpetual motion machine, but we've managed to invent a perpetual money machine that just goes round and round out of our pockets to government bureaucrats, who then give it to the NGOs, who then give themselves lavish salaries and then kick back a little bit to the politicians who authorize more money out of our pockets, and round and round and round it goes forever, and without any oversight. I mean, the Heartland Institute, we are a nonprofit. We are not, I guess we would be you could technically classify us as an NGO or a non-governmental organization. And we are fully a non-governmental organization. In 40 years, we have never taken one thin dime of government money ever. And we never would, because that's against our principles. And yet you see these outfits. What the hell does Stacey Abrams know about powering, about the energy industry? Nothing is the answer. And how can an organization that was set up on Tuesday, then on Thursday get $2 billion in its coffers to then distribute for whatever it is that they do with absolutely zero oversight? They don't have to report to any board of directors or to the taxpayers or to anybody. And so what you have, in fact, we've talked about this on several shows, both this one here on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern time, and on the Climate Realism show every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern time, about how that, Project Veritas did their little, honey trap hidden camera journalism, in which the guy said it was like throwing gold bars off the Titanic, and how much the EPA was trying to shovel out to organizations like Stacey Abrams here to get as much money out as possible. What people kind of forget about that interview is he also said, although that was a great takeaway quote, he also said, a lot of us here are kind of scared that we're going to get fired. So we're already starting to leave. Where are they leaving to? The very NGOs at which they're shoveling all of this money to, so that they can get even higher paying jobs at these, basically do no work, have no accountability NGOs that are swimming in millions and sometimes billions of dollars of our money. And so again, it's just this, it's so corrupt. And DOGE, we have to have a DOGE and government spending update. That's going to be the fourth segment on this show for a long, long time, because more stuff like this keeps coming out. But Stacey Abrams has no business being even involved in an organization like this. She has no expertise, yet she expected to be able to distribute $2 billion. Where does that go? To other friends and relatives and other people who set up another 501c3 that doesn't actually do anything except collect our money and have nice fat bank accounts. This corruption that's being exposed here by DOGE, if Donald Trump actually does nothing else as president, and Elon Musk does nothing else in actual public service, not what people call public service these days, which again is just filling their pockets with our money, he will have accomplished and done more good for this country than the last 6 Republican presidents and Republican Congresses could even dream of doing, because the sunlight is the disinfectant here, and people are pissed. I'm pissed. More people should be pissed, and more new corruption like this comes out every day. And the good news is, guys, Kash Patel was approved as the director of the FBI today, this morning. And so guess who gets to investigate all of this corruption and criminal activity? Kash Patel, who has been vilified and attacked and almost had his life ruined. He's probably lucky he wasn't put in jail in the last administration. And now he can start sending the FBI out there. There was a great interview I think he gave on, maybe it was a Sean Ryan podcast or something else, and he said he would shut down the headquarters, the J. Hoover building, shut down the headquarters and turn it into a museum of the deep state, and then tell all FBI agents that are in that office, go out there and be cops. You're cops, go out there and be cops. Well, now he can tell them to go out there and be cops and investigate this obvious corruption that has been hidden from the American people for far, far too long.
Well, Jim, that's all well and good, but you've forgotten one very important thing, and that is that Stacey Abrams is, after all, president of Earth. So she
well, she's also the governor of Georgia last time I
checked. She's the governor of Georgia, and she's also the president of the entire planet. So
that's right. That's a Star Trek Discovery reference.
That is. She gets to have all the money that she wants.
She's also a novelist. Did you know that?
Oh wow! No, I didn't know that one.
She writes romance novels.
Well, another interesting thing that we discovered through DOGE is that apparently vampires are collecting Social Security. It's fascinating. They came up with, and Luke pointed this out in the comments here. He said, do you have any updates on the Social Security for people over 115 years old? I see reports saying that this is just a clerical error, but the age numbers that Musk's team reported said there were many more ages. Yeah, they were going up to 300 years old, I think, in the Social Security information there. Do you guys have any? I actually didn't look too far into this besides glancing over that chart that Elon posted and saying, yeah, that sounds about right, and then moving on, which is a terrible, terrible thing to be not surprised by, right? The idea that somewhere in the payroll, there's people,
Well,
there's mystery people that were never declared dead for the purposes of Social Security, or
oh,
are
of
checks
course.
going out. I
Of
mean,
course. Yeah,
uh,
I mean, of course. So far, Doge has saved $55 billion in 1 month. And they've only gone through a couple agencies so far: USAID, IRS, a little bit with the Department of Education. They haven't even gotten to Department of Defense. They haven't gotten to HUD yet. There's a lot more fat that they're going to find here. I saw an interview with Howard Lutnick last night, and Howard Lutnick is the Commerce Secretary, and Howard Lutnick was saying this: in Donald Trump's second term, the plan is to balance the budget. And when I heard that, my head was like, are you kidding me? How are you going to do that? And he said, here's the plan. First of all, they are going to cut probably $1 trillion in wasteful spending after the entire DOGE 18-month project is over. $1 trillion. That includes a ton of Medicaid fraud, a ton of Medicare fraud, and a ton of Social Security fraud. If they can lop $1 trillion off of our annual budget, and they can also raise a bunch of money with their tariffs, Howard Lutnick was saying, you know what we could do? We could completely get rid of the IRS, and there would be no more income taxes, zero income tax. We would have a balanced budget. We would make our money like we used to under Presidents McKinley and Roosevelt and all these other people before. Remember, we didn't even have an income tax until the 1920s. There was no income tax. It was actually against the Constitution. We had to pass an amendment for the government to do that. So I just am imagining a time, maybe in 2030 or so, when the IRS doesn't even really even exist anymore. The United States pays for its spending through tariffs, and we have a much leaner government. That would cause an economic boom like nothing we've ever even come close to seeing before. The amount of money that the government would raise, even in the meantime, after these tax cuts go through again, would be more.
Whoops.
Whoop, Chris got lost there. You're muted, Chris, for some reason.
We just can't have nice things today.
Yeah.
Chris, you're still muted.
Yeah, you're still muted. For
I don't
some
know
reason.
if it's your mic went out.
Maybe the mic went out. Yeah, but it just says mute. Anyway, I would just add to what Chris was saying there. It's like what's important. Yeah, can we balance the budget? I think we can. I think it's probably going to be just the first pass through by DOGE will find $1 trillion in waste, fraud, and abuse. Trump and Elon they were interviewed by Hannity the other day. I didn't see the whole interview, but Trump said that no, we're not going to touch Social Security, we're not going to touch Medicaid and Medicare. And I saw some fiscal conservatives on X saying, well, if you're not going to touch those things, we're never going to balance the budget anyway. We're never going to stop increasing our national debt year after year. And okay, you say that, but if 1/3 is the floor of fraud and misallocated payments in entitlements like Social Security and Medicare, then that goes a long, long way to fixing it without making sure that the people who have earned and deserve those benefits still receive them. What I love about what's going on right now is that we are well past now the kinds of arguments I've heard coming out of Washington and from Republican members of Congress for years and years and years. It's that, you can't, cut waste, fraud, and abuse your way to anything close to a balanced budget. Well, we haven't ever really even tried. Literally, this is the first time any real effort has ever been made to make sure that the money going out of the Treasury is going where it's supposed to go, instead of being basically a money laundering, untraceable cash reserve for the worst people in the world.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, Elon Musk even said that when he went to Treasury and they actually finally allowed him in, and his DOGE people went to work, they found that so much of the spending that goes out of the Treasury, and they've never denied any payment request, by the way, it always gets made, but there was no system to track where that money went. And so he's implemented a tracking system, which every, competent government should have. And again, American people were amazed. Seriously? We don't even know where the money's going? And so just these basic reforms, it's been barely 30 days, guys. And look how much more accountability we have in our government today. And as Chris pointed out, if some of these reforms, and they're pretty radical, but I love them, if they actually if they're implemented into policy, and Congress needs to get off their ass and put these things into law, by the way, but we will have economic growth that would be enormous, and that would increase revenue into the Treasury through our economic activity, not by taking money directly out of our pockets. And that, with some spending restraint, would balance the budget and actually, maybe for the first time in our entire lives, see the national debt go down a little bit instead of always increasing. What is it now? Is it $9 trillion? Or no, I'm sorry, $37 trillion?
37 trillion.
Yeah.
My mic's back, thank God. Just real quick, I just wanted to say, so yeah, we are now, our GDP to debt ratio is 100%. That has not happened since World War II. This is getting really serious. I remember literally back in 2006, 2007, 2008, when we were talking about a debt bomb, and Paul Ryan, who I highly respect at the time, was talking about, we have a debt bomb on our hands. And even Obama was saying, hey, we got to stop using the nation's credit card. We have, for Republican and Democrats have been, guilty of doing this. It's so easy to just, say, just let it be status quo. But now we're going to go in here. We're going to take a look and see where this money is actually going to. And I think one of the best things that I've heard in the past couple of days is they're talking about DOGE dividend checks. So if DOGE can slash, I don't know, maybe, a couple $100 billion this year alone, and they say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to spend maybe, I don't know, 20% of that, paying off the debt. But then, you know what we're going to do? We're going to give Americans back a lot of that, because that was their money in the first place. That, I think, would be a political winner. And I can't even begin to imagine how popular that would be. And that would be so different from the stimulus checks that were sent out during COVID, because that would be saying, hey, you've been giving the government thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars every year in your working life, and we have just spent it on stupid stuff. We've blown it. We haven't even kept track of it. We're going to stop doing that now, and we're going to start giving you a little bit of that back. The American people would welcome that with open arms.
Yes. You've just given me a great transition into this section here about from Forbes. And the article is titled, "Will you get Musk's DOGE dividend via a $5,000 stimulus check?" And like you said, I think it's a false direction to be calling it a stimulus check.
It's not a stimulus check, right? It's a rebate. It's a rebate. We're giving you your money back.
In a recent social media exchange, Elon Musk, head of the Department of Government Efficiency, hinted at the possibility of issuing $5,000 checks to American taxpayers, a concept dubbed the DOGE dividend. This proposal originated from investment firm CEO and DOGE advisor James Fishback, suggests allocating 20% of DOGE's projected savings and distributing it to tax-paying households. Forbes does point out some of the issues that they see with it. They say, first, congressional approval. They would need to pass legislative authorization in order to distribute funds like that. This person says economic implications would exacerbate inflationary pressures. I'm not entirely convinced that would be the case here.
Because they're not printing more money. That's why.
Because there's no extra money being sent out.
Exactly. So they're not hitting the money the money button at the Federal Reserve. This already exists. So they're just saying, we were going to spend it on such and such, which would have been wasteful, but we're just going to give it back to you so you can go and spend it better, because you know what is best, the best way to spend your own money. There's one other thing I would like to say about this. We shouldn't say most, but a large percentage of Americans don't pay 1 penny in federal income taxes, not 1 penny. So I think that these dividend checks should go to the people who actually do have skin in the game and actually do pay more than $5,000 per year in taxes. Mitt Romney said it back in 2012 that where, 49% of the people get more than they give to the government. We're even worse than that now in 2025. So we need to, I think, get people to have more skin in the game. And, for a lot of Americans, they don't pay anything in federal income taxes. They pay nothing. They actually get money back.
Yep.
Let me just add this. This would be the smartest political thing move any of us have ever seen in our entire lives, and I'll tell you why. And it's because we are already seeing there. I don't think they're very effective, but we're already seeing the corrupt legacy media giving us these sob stories of these federal bureaucrats who thought they had literally, and they even quoted saying this. They thought they had endless job security, that they would never be fired, that they would never be held accountable, that there's really no way to ever get them out of government, and that they're public servants. And so they're working for us, and they've sacrificed so much, but they had job security. And so sob story after sob story, which, I don't think works, certainly doesn't work on me and probably most of the listeners of this podcast, but you really want to put to bed the even small chance such media propaganda could work to slow down the DOGE train. Give everybody a rebate, even people, Chris, who didn't pay any income taxes. Then you would see you can't do this sort of, let's call it what it is, this radical policy without the support of the American people. The way you keep that is to let us get a rebate on the wasted money that has been stolen from us and wasted, and not just wasted, but wasted in corrupt ways. Wasted in ways that enrich people who offer no service and no value to society, but really are only in this for the grift, the legitimate grift, and the stealing of our money. All these NGOs, we're going to keep seeing it day after day after day. But if you want to make sure that the political momentum continues for this very necessary cleaning out of all the corruption in our government, you got to give people DOGE dividends. It's a brilliant idea rolled out at the perfect time. And we'll see how the details work out, but I think it should happen.
I would love to see this come paired with a significant drawdown, at least, if not a total elimination of income tax, right? Like they look at this and they say, actually, we don't need to be doing this to you guys at all. I mean, getting rid of the income tax would not make inflation worse, would it?
No, of course
not. So why would giving people tax rebates make inflation worse? I don't understand that line of thinking. Maybe I'm missing something.
There's one other aspect of this story, and that is that some local judges are stopping some of these DOGE actions. But from what I've seen so far, it looks like the Supreme Court will take this up, because what the Democrats always do, they shop for a friendly judge in Rhode Island or in, Portland or Washington State or wherever. And they say this local judge is going to make an injunction for the entire country, which that is not the way our legal system is supposed to operate. So they have, these judges have thrown some wrenches in the DOGE machine, but I'm pretty confident from everything that I've seen, heard constitutional, scholars say this is totally constitutional. The judges are acting way out of line here, and the Supreme Court will most likely take this up soon and say, no, actually, this is a completely legitimate act on behalf of the president and the executive, branch here, because the president at the end of the day has authority over the executive branch. And it seems that these judges are saying, no, we don't want you to do this, so we're going to just prevent you from doing it. But those judges don't have that power. So that's something that I think is going to really, come out in the next probably couple months.
Right. And when we do get to trying to push for the stuff that DOGE has pointed out to actually get placed before the legislature to permanently remove a lot of these spending areas from our budget, it's going to be a major mask off moment, I think. Not that we haven't already had it, based on the keening wails of a whole bunch of different legislators who just so happen to have USAID connections or something like that. We're going to see a lot of people who we trusted were, fairly good conservatives or Republicans, probably vote against putting in these spending cuts. Right now, there is a spending bill going forward, I believe, that is, as Rand Paul points out on his X account, not actually going to decrease spending. It's actually increasing spending once again. So many of our supposed friends in the legislature are not actually on our side. And it's going to be time to hold these guys accountable for this stuff, because there's no excuse anymore. Like Jim pointed out, we've been talking about looking at wasteful spending for decades and decades and decades. And they've never even tried they've never even come close to trying to do something like what Trump is doing.
President Trump has been having a lot of news conferences about this. And one of the things that he brings up is how often someone gets a federal contract for maybe 5 months, maybe a year, maybe 3 years. And for some reason, that contract just ends up getting, reestablished again and again, and the checks just keep on coming. There's no incentive for that person, obviously, to go to Treasury and say, hey, stop spending, stop sending me this money. So what we need to do is we need to go to the source of the problem. The source of the problem is the Treasury Department, as Elon Musk said, and a judge said that he couldn't even have access to these records. He even said that the judge even said that Scott Bessent, the new Treasury Secretary, couldn't even look at him. And Scott Bessent saying, of course I can. So, there are going to be these little like legal, fights and little dramas here and there. But what really Elon Musk is trying to get to the bottom of is, why is our Treasury spending system just sending checks out with no information attached to it? It should not be that way, obviously. A lot of this also has to do with government systems that are from the 1960s or, the retirement cave and all this kind of stuff. Come on, we can do better than this, everybody. So that's this is called Revenge of the Nerds. And, and DOGE and Elon Musk are actually, going in there and cleaning house and using their AI and their, calculators and just showing the people this is the math. The math speaks for itself,
Yep, absolutely. No more government cheese caves. We're done with that. All right. Well, I think, Jim, unless there's something you want to add, that's about the time we have for this episode today, unfortunately. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We are live every single week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, X, YouTube, Facebook, all over those places. For audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using and leave us a nice review. Thank you so much to all of our usual panelists. Jim, what's up with you today? What else do you have to plug?
Just follow me on X at J Lakely. Follow the Heartland Institute on X at Heartland Inst, and always visit heartland.org.
And Chris, what do you got?
Same thing that Jim said.
Okay. Well, that was really fun. Good job, guys. Thank you, everybody. We will see you again next week.